Hello, my name is Ellison Stansel, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. How many of you have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder?
Me.
If you're like most people, you've heard of PTSD at one time or another, but do you know how many people are actually affected by it? If you look here, according to the Mayo Clinic's website, 70% of adults experience a traumatic event at some point in their life. Of that 70%, 20% will develop PTSD. That means that 8% of Americans are suffering right now. Can anyone make a guess to put that into perspective? Like how many 8% of America's population is?
No.
No.
Well, if you took 8% of the population, that would be roughly the size and population of Texas. So it's a lot of people. Cases of PTSD are even more prevalent among members of the armed forces, with the Veterans Administration estimating that 31% of Vietnam veterans, 10% of Gulf War veterans, and 11% of our current war in Afghanistan veterans suffering from some form of PTSD. Today, I'd like to help you guys understand the cases or the causes of post-traumatic stress disorder, so you can recognize the symptoms when they start to arrive, and finally be able to help your loved ones find the treatment or help that they desperately need. Catching the onset of post-traumatic stress disorder early could literally save somebody's life. You never know who could be struggling the uphill battle, and they might not know where to go for help. The first thing I would like to discuss are the causes of PTSD. Some of the causes are, of course, the one we typically hear of is combat exposure, but it could also be childhood neglect and physical abuse, sexual assaults, physical assaults, something such as being threatened with a weapon. All those are traumatic events. Some of you may have come to the realization, or may have friends or loved ones who've been through some of these and wonder, how can I look for the signs so I can help them, if they're struggling. So next, we'll go over some of the symptoms to look for and help you recognize the onset of PTSD as early as possible. There are several symptoms, and they pop up at different times. One of the most prevalent are intrusive memories. The next is avoidance. Negative changes in thoughts or mood. Changes in emotional reactions to everyday situations. And each symptom could be more intense than the other. It all depends on the individual and the traumatic event that took place. Let's see here. This is the DSM criteria for PTSD. And basically, to be diagnosed with PTSD, of course, you got your exposure, showing one or more symptoms, and the troubles persist longer than a month. I mean, it's natural for, to go through the symptoms after a traumatic event, but if they carry on for a long time, that's when you should probably start looking into getting help. Let's see here. There are two avenues to dealing with PTSD. One is psychotherapy, cognitive therapy, which is talking about the event, how it changed you. You have exposure therapy, which is exposing the patient to the weapon or object that triggered the post-traumatic stress disorder. Then there is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's brain training similar to video games. And then, of course, there's medications, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and prazosin. I've had to look up how to pronounce that several times. All those can help you with the symptoms, but the combination of the two is what typically helps the most. All right. Now you know the different ways to cope with PTSD. You can offer plenty of different options to help your loved ones. No one person's the same, just like no one traumatic situation was the same. Some things may not work for some people. Most people with PTSD don't want to admit that they're suffering. There's a stigma about it. I say they could be embarrassed that they have it, or they don't believe that they're actually afflicted with it. However, you now know the causes and the symptoms to look for. So if you know someone that you think might be suffering from PTSD, help them. Let them know you're there, and let them know that they're not alone. Remember, 8% of the people who are suffering, again, that's the size of the population of Texas. So that's a lot of people. Thank you guys for listening to my speech today.